So today we're going to talk about a river, but this isn't just any river. We're talking about a place that's been a sacred home, a fortress, and a prize for empires. This is the story of the Colorado, and believe me, it's a story all about transformation, about how it changed hands completely. You know, for centuries, this great river was basically a fortress. I mean, think about it. Its powerful currents, the brutal desert all around. It protected a whole way of life. So this is the story of how that fortress was taken, how its moat was drained and its garden paved right over. Okay, so to really get how this all went down, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before it was called the Colorado, this river was just home. We're starting with its first people, the Mohave, or as they call themselves, the Aha Macav. For them, this wasn't just a river, it was the absolute center of their universe. They had a name for their homeland, the first house. And get this, their creation story says the river itself was formed way back around 700 AD, when their god literally drove a willow stick into the ground at Spirit Mountain. So you see, this wasn't just where they got water. This was their sacred origin, the very thing that shaped their entire society. Yeah, some people have even called it the Nile of the West, and for good reason. Just like the Nile in Egypt, the Colorado would flood every year, and when the water receded, it left behind this incredibly fertile soil. It meant the Mojave could be farmers, a real rarity in a region full of hunters and gatherers. And that stability, it gave them something super valuable, extra time. Time they used to, well, master their entire domain. And when I say mastery, I mean it was legendary. We're talking about Mojave runners who could cover 50 miles a day, barefoot, across that brutal desert. This incredible ability let them build a huge trade network, the Mojave Trail, that stretched all the way to the Pacific. So you see, they weren't just living by the river, they were the gatekeepers of the whole Southwest. But of course, that kind of isolated world could never last forever, right? So in the 17th century, the first outsiders show up, the Spanish. And their first reaction wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't aggression, it was, well, something more like awe. And when you look at the facts, it's easy to see why. The Spanish actually called this place the Valley of the Giants. I mean, the average Mojave man was about 6'5". The average Spanish soldier? 5'5". That's a whole foot taller. That kind of physical presence, yeah, it's going to command some serious and very cautious respect. So in the beginning, everything was peaceful. The Mojave, they didn't really see a threat. They saw these newcomers as a potential resource, another piece of the puzzle. They acted as hosts, giving the Spanish explorers the most crucial things you could ask for in the desert: game, water, and shade. You can actually see the Spanish attitude shifting just by looking at the names they gave the river. It's fascinating. In 1604, Don Juan de Oñate shows up, and he's full of optimism, right? So he calls it Rio Buena Esperanza, the River of Good Hope. But fast forward to 1776, Father Francisco Garcés takes one look at the water, all thick and heavy with silts, and he renames it Rio Colorado, the Red River. That early hope, it was pretty much gone, replaced by a much grittier reality. And then, it all fell apart. On a second trip, the Spanish made a huge mistake, a turning point. They captured 2 Mojave youths to take back to Spain. Just like that, trust was shattered. It was a total betrayal. The Mojave went from being hospitable guides to, in the Spanishers' own words, a fierce and merciless obstacle. Okay, so jump forward about a century. A new group arrives on the scene, the Americans. And these guys were different. They weren't explorers looking for a path to the ocean. These were the so-called mountain men, and they were there for resources, plain and simple. This is where the story turns and gets a whole lot more violent. And things went south fast. It's a pretty clear progression. Step 1, a trapper named Jedediah Smith shows up in 1826. Things are friendly, they trade stuff, it's all good. But step 2, just a year later, another group, the Pattie group, comes through. And these guys, they steal from and kill the Mojave. So step 3? Fierce retaliation. The Mojave ambush them, and from then on, crossing that river becomes a deadly, deadly gauntlet. So what caused this sudden explosion of violence? Well, one account from the time puts it down to the trappers' bigoted and haughty attitude. Think about that. Unlike the Spanish, who at least started out with some respect, even awe, these guys came in with total contempt. It was an arrogance that, frankly, turned out to be a fatal mistake. And the consequences were huge. Because the Mojave defended their homeland so fiercely, the river completely changed its role. It went from being a potential route, a highway, to a massive barrier. You had major trade routes like the old Spanish Trail that had to go hundreds of miles out of their way through way tougher country just to avoid them. The river was now a no-go zone.
All right, now we hit the final chapter. It's after 1848. The U.S. has just annexed the whole territory. And now it's not just a few trappers causing trouble. It's the full power of the United States military. And they're here to redefine the river. For good.
And just like that, the whole perspective shifts. It's all about strategic points now, especially the Yuma crossing. It was only about 400 feet wide there, which made it the absolute best, most vital spot to get across. It became the most lucrative, most important point in the entire Southwest. The river wasn't a home anymore. It was a line on a military map, a commercial asset. And the Mohave people? Well, in the eyes of the U.S. military, they weren't even people anymore. They were a number, an estimated 3,000 hostile warriors. That's it. The transformation from a human resource to a strategic obstacle was complete. They were just a tactical wall that needed to be knocked down. But this conquest wasn't just about the people. It was about the river itself. The wild Rio Colorado, the Red River. It's basically gone. Back then, it was churning with that famous red silt, lined with these dense cottonwood forests. Now? Well, now it's a tame river. That red silt is stuck at the bottom of dams, and that whole true riparian riverine ecosystem has been, well, washed away. Which brings us right back to where we started, that fortress. It's like the quote says, the fortress changed hands, the moat was drained, the garden was paved over, and new roads were built. The Mojave's first house was completely remade in the image of an empire. So the river was tamed to build an empire. But what this whole story really shows us is that a river like this is never just a landscape. It's a center of power. And now, in our age of scarcity and drought, a whole new fight for that power is brewing. Which leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Who's going to control it next?